I recently decided that I want a bike to cover long distances without sacrificing the fun factor. So I booked test rides on the Suzuki GSX-S 1000 GT, the BMW R1250RS and the Kawasaki Ninja 1000 SX. I rode each bike for about an hour, so this won't be a detailed in-depth review, but I did ride them all back to back on the same day, so I'll cover the key basic areas of riding position and comfort, wind protection and performance and handling. Plus there'll be a few other points worth considering for each bike, and if you stick around to the end, I'll tell you which one I'm going to buy and why. And finally, for reference, I'm 6'1" with a 33-inch inseam, and my current bike is a Yamaha MT-10, so that's what I'm used to riding. We'll start with the BMW, which had the sportiest riding position of all three. My legs weren't too bent back, but there's a definite stretch to the handlebars, even with my long arms, and it's the sportiest reach of the three bikes I rode. I didn't notice any weight on my wrists, but my back was slightly uncomfortable, and it's noticeably more lent forward than my MT-10, although if you're coming from a sports bike, you might not feel as bad. The seat is fine and padded enough without being awesome, and I wouldn't feel the need to upgrade to a comfort seat, although this bike was spec'd with the optional heated seat, so I can't tell you if that's the same level of padding as the stock seat. This bike also had electronic suspension and dynamic riding modes, which were absolutely fantastic. It felt both plush and sporty and was a really fun bike to throw around. It flicks from side to side really quickly, which belies its weight, and it was great fun on a set of bends. The engine also has absolutely loads of low down grunt. It's insanely torquey, which I absolutely loved, and it was the fastest feeling bike of the three because it accelerates so hard from any gear. The screen is very good, and I felt fine sitting at 90 miles an hour. The wind was only on the top of my helmet, with none on my shoulders or chest. It was a tiny little bit noisy, but nothing to worry about, and a slightly bigger screen would probably give it close to adventure bike levels of wind protection. The dash is also excellent, class leading in fact. It's very easy to read, although you can go menu diving, which makes it a little distracting. And setting the heated grips is a bit of a faff, as you have to press the button, then select grips or seat, then select what temperature you want, then press confirm, when all you really want is one button to cycle through the various heat levels. And I was surprised to find that I really liked the keyless go system. The fuel tank is keyless as well, and you can set the steering lock without the key, so it really is a true keyless system, unlike some other manufacturers who make you get the key out to lock the steering lock or open the fuel tank, which completely defeats the object. The mirrors were excellent too, and the only other thing I'll say is that I think this is the best looking bike of the three. That's subjective of course, but for me it's a cool bike and has strong garage appeal. Next up we have the Suzuki GSX-S GT, which I'll tell you straight off the bat I really liked. The seating position is familiar to me as a super naked rider. My legs were slightly more tucked up than the others, courtesy of the 810mm seat height, but not uncomfortably so, and the reach of the bars was very natural and easy. And crucially there was no weight on my wrists and no discomfort in my back. The screen is very quiet, the quietest of all three bikes in fact. It's non-adjustable, but sitting at 80 miles per hour is totally fine, and 90 miles per hour was just about okay too. There's an optional touring screen which might just be perfect, but I have no complaints with the stock screen, and it's very good for a sports touring bike. And the engine is excellent too. I personally tend to prefer grunty, torquey engines rather than revvy inline fours. And I've had a 1290 Super Duke, Ducati Monster 1200 and of course the MT-10 in recent years. The Suzuki is very revvy by comparison, but it surprised me that I really enjoyed that. It encourages you to push on, and it was the most exciting bike to ride and very rewarding to ride hard. That's helped by the up and down quick shifter, which felt really slick all the time, and I didn't find the engine very buzzy, so I had no unpleasant sensation in my hands, feet or bum after the ride, and that goes for the BMW and the Kawasaki too. The Suzuki's handling was also excellent, and I found myself hunting out B-roads more than I did on the Kawasaki. It's not quite as flickable as the Beamer, but it still felt great in the bends, and handling is definitely a strong point. I'd happily take this on a track day, and on a long journey you'd have a lot of fun when you get to your destination after a comfortable ride there in the first place. The mirrors are excellent and give a really good view. They're a long way away from you, so they're difficult to adjust or fold in when filtering, but I didn't see any vibrations in them, so they did their job very well. The dash is also very good, basic and not flashy like the BMWs, but clear and uncluttered and very functional. As standard, this bike doesn't come with heated grips, same story for the Beamer, and it's annoying to have the cruise control engage button on the right hand side, which is of course your throttle hand. The pillion seat also doesn't look great. It was the smallest of the three and it looks a little cramped to me, but it's still a step up from a super naked, and the rider seat was totally fine. I probably wouldn't say no to a comfort seat on the Suzuki if there was such an option, but it's only marginally less comfortable than the BMW and the Kawasaki, And as far as I can tell, this bike has the shortest fuel range of the three, so you'll get a break more often. Having asked around on all the Facebook groups, the Suzy gets around 150 miles to the tank, whereas the Carry gets 170 and the Beamer 180. Although that was a bit of a straw poll and will of course vary, so take that with a pinch of salt. And while I do think the BMW is a handsome machine, I think the Suzy runs it really close in the looks department, and I think most people will be proud to show it off to their mates. And finally we have the Kawasaki. It has a really comfortable seating position, nice and upright like a naked bike with no uncomfortable stretch to the bars, and in that regard I found it the most comfortable of the three. The seat was also good and I wouldn't feel the need to buy a comfort seat, and that is helped by the suspension, which was very plush, and the leg position, which isn't too cramped. In terms of wind protection though, this was its downfall in my opinion. The bike I rode had the optional touring screen, which I found really noisy, and it also gave a lot of wind on my helmet and across my shoulders and arms. I could still sit comfortably at 80 miles an hour, but I felt discouraged to go any faster because of the noise and buffeting. I found it much better when I crouched down a little, so a slightly bigger screen would probably fix that, but this bike already looks dorky enough for me, so I'd be interested to see instead if the stock screen generates less turbulence. The engine was very usable though, absolutely loads of power and torque, you don't have to thrash it at all, and it's an excellent overtaking bike. And the engine was a tiny bit buzzy, but not uncomfortably or annoyingly so. As with all three of these bikes, the mirrors on the Kawasaki and the quickshifter were fantastic, and the dash is clear and easy to read too. And I personally found the heated grips to be better than the BMW, nice and toasty even on the lower setting, and simple to use with a decent sized single button setup. I found the Kawasaki's handling to be fairly neutral, sporty enough but without being particularly engaging, and while the Kawasaki is an excellent practical sports tourer, it lacks the excitement factor the other two bikes have. It's also worth noting that none of these bikes felt too heavy on the go despite their weight, although that all changes when you're wheeling them around. And as someone with a gravel drive, I dread the prospect of lugging any of these around. So which bike am I going to buy then? Well, I actually enjoyed all three, and I think they will each be excellent for the right person. The BMW is the poshest and has the best spec, albeit of course that comes at a significant cost. The engine is absolutely fantastic and it handles like a dream, really sporty as well as being generally comfortable. But for me, I was too canted forward, so this is probably a better option for someone coming from a sports bike than a naked bike. I found the Kawasaki to be the most practical, it's the most comfortable, especially below 80 miles per hour, the engine is very usable and it represents the best value for money with a really good level of spec. But for me, it's a bit too sensible and I'm not too keen on the looks, and I see the Kawasaki as more of a tool than a plaything. A very good tool, but more functional than exciting. And saving the best for last then is the Suzuki. For me, it was the perfect compromise of comfort and sportiness. With the exception of heated grips, it comes with everything you need from a sports tourer, and so it represents very good value for money. It handles great, the engine is an absolute blast without being too stretched, and it's the bike I'd most want to ride to the Nürburgring and back. It has a 3-year warranty and Suzuki make them tight, so you probably won't need to bother your local mechanic, and so it's for all of those reasons that this is the bike I settled on. If you have any questions then pop them down below, and if you enjoyed this video and want more content like this, particularly on the Suzuki, make sure you like and subscribe, and until next time, ride safe.